So this is us in Norway in 2017 when we went to cruise up the coast of Norway, but also we got there pretty early so we could do some skiing. And we didn't really have the boat insulated as we weren't spending a winter there or any long period of time, and the heating system wasn't exactly great. So I've put this video together in preparation for going up to Svarlbard and maybe Greenland later, to just show how we've improved that and how I've gone about it. It might be useful. I wouldn't say it was best practice by any standard, but it might be useful to some thinking about insulating their boat.
Up inside the roof at the moment, it's basically just polystyrene. Firstly, it's not the best insulator, and secondly, it's super flammable, so it's probably not the best thing to have on the boat. Either way, we're taking that out and putting in a better system. So you can see up here the old polystyrene, which is about 25mm, then with an air gap. And then here you can see the bare GRP. What we're doing is putting some foil-backed closed-cell foam, basically Armaflex. This isn't actually Armaflex, it's car insulation, but it's the same thing, which is like that, closed cell, so moisture won't be able to seep through it. And then the bottom of it is foil backed, and then the other side is self-adhesive, so we don't have to be messing around with contact adhesive and glue and all of that lot. So we've put that up here, and that is pushed up right onto the fiberglass on the roof, and then we're using tape to tape in the corners so there's no airflow whatsoever, to hopefully prevent condensation. So that's like aluminium tape basically. That initial layer, yeah, is really a condensation layer, although it will act as insulation. And then we've got another thing called SuperQuilt. Is this kind of quilt material, which is layers of recycled plastic with layers of foil between it, and then that will push up into the cavity, which can squidge, but if the cavity is large enough, it'll expand in the air gap. So where this air gap is, that will then be filled with SuperQuilt, which will act as purely insulation. We could have put the SuperQuilt straight up against the GRP, but then we'd have had to glue it in place to make sure it is bonded properly to prevent condensation, and I felt like some of the closed cell foam, this would be an easier membrane to work with. So we're doing that to begin with. We'll see how we go.
So I tried going with SuperQuilt instead of very thick Armaflex because, well, firstly, 50 or 70mm Armaflex is quite difficult to get hold of, and it's very expensive. Secondly, the SuperQuilt is fire rated, it's recycled, it's made in the UK, and it can be squished into smaller areas, which makes it more flexible for different cavities of different sizes. And it's made for lofts basically and wall insulation, but it can be stapled directly to battens, and therefore it can change its width when it's squished, which makes it quite flexible, I think, for different size of cavities when insulating a boat.
Taking out the old polystyrene insulation, which probably does a good job, apart from the fact it's super flammable. You can tell where there's no insulation because when I'm taking this off, the foam that was already there used to go, you know, pretty much all the way, but then it wasn't tucked underneath here. And just underneath here where there wasn't any, it was all wet, all just condensation. And also just around here where they'd kind of cut out a bit. It's amazing really that could have had such an effect, which is why I'm trying to make it as tight as possible. So here, and taping it off and keeping any point that will cause a kind of a cold patch and therefore condensation. Now, some people say it's easier to get the non-self-adhesive stuff and use spray adhesive or contact adhesive, but I don't know. I mean, I tried using the spray stuff, but it's just really messy and it doesn't stick straight away, and you've got to hold it in place, and I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of a fan of this stuff, to be honest, and if you need to get it into a slot where you don't use the self-adhesive, then you can do. You can just not bother taking the self-adhesive off and just leaving the film on the back. Insulation is up there, foil taped around all of the edges. The first layer of closed cell foam is now in, and it's taped up to make it completely sealed. So that's the condensation layer with a little bit of insulation itself, and now the main insulation goes in, which is the quilt. And I've sealed it all up, and now that pushes up and into what would be the air gap, and then these battens go across, which then the roofing panels will go on. You can see here on this side quilt material with layers of foil in between it.
So anyone with experience will say that the two foil materials touching each other will transmit heat, and where you won't benefit from having the Armaflex foil backed, which is correct. You would need an air gap below the Armaflex. But anyway, that's the way it came, and so I'm probably not benefiting really in this case for having that Armaflex foil backed. Another thing we've done, and I don't know how much it works for insulation, but it certainly helps against condensation. But on the windows, we put this on, which is basically cling film. I got the idea from a member that has a boat called Navara in the Ocean Cruising Club, and he sails all over the place and has good results with it. So we put it on our windows, and it's dead easy to use actually, and super cheap. You put it over your port lights and anywhere you can really, and then just put a hairdryer to it, and it's easily removed at the end of the season. But it completely cuts down condensation and presumably insulates pretty well as well. Another thing I'll touch on for boats with big windows like ours, we have stormboards to protect our windows from a knockdown offshore, and I ended up putting a neoprene on the inside of them, and it entirely cuts down condensation on the aluminium frames and then acts as double glazing as well. So I've actually ended up leaving them on a lot longer than I would do normally, and I'd usually take them off after a long passage. So here's a little bit of a test just after we'd finished the insulation. That we had a bit of a cold snap, and it was getting down to, I don't know, about -5 at night, which might be a good test for Svarlbard's summer conditions at least. And yeah, there was ice on the deck and so on. So yeah, we thought it was a reasonable test to go out there.
So are you warm?
Yeah, really warm. Toasty feet. Warm legs.
Well, you can't really see it there, but there's a radiator down there that we've put in. It's my dive watch says it's 21 degrees. We had it to 22 degrees last night, and it is freezing out there. There's ice on the deck at the moment, or it's just starting, and we haven't had any problems getting it up to temperature, whereas before, last time I went to Norway, we put the heating on and it would just kind of hold it steady. It wouldn't actually climb. We never really got it, well, more than about 16 degrees really. I'm not entirely sure whether it's the insulation or a combination of the insulation and the improved heating, but it definitely, well, I don't know, I think the insulation has a lot to do with it. But it's definitely, like, it's now nearly 8 p.m. We've had it on for a couple of hours and I had to just turn it off because it's just getting a little bit too toasty in here. So I think there's no way of really quantifying what the insulation has done, but it's all we know is that it is cold outside right now and we are very toasty inside.